Hello guys, we're team 1.2. You can also call us the salsa team, and you'll know why, just in a second. So the Latin American Youth Center, its mission mainly is to serve the youth, to serve the underprivileged youth. And the biggest problem, like with any other nonprofit organization, is that it runs into financial obstacles and also runs into human resources obstacles, your volunteer base, your employee base. So our proposal, I'll give you a sneak peek of it, is our multi-pricing model for LAYC's consulting services. The result of this is that we'll have a new source of unrestricted revenue, and we'll also have an increased network, a bigger database of volunteers and employees. Just a brief history and mission of LAYC. Three things for the youth they want. They want them to achieve academic success. Ultimately, with the academic success, they want them to get a job, and they also want to provide them with necessary skills to lead healthy and happy lives. So in order to do this, they adopted in the late 1990s a PYD program, the Positive Youth Development Program, and integrated with their core values and their company culture. And this is what they call salsa. 10 years later, fast forward, Impactful Consulting was created informally, just with the culmination of their internal skills. They realized that PYD was working really well for them in terms of empowering youth. They substantiated through their data analysis tool called ETO, which we'll mention later. Unfortunately, this kind of never took off. They were trying to go out to other organizations because it worked really well for them. They wanted to go out to other organizations, figure out their salsa, and integrate the PYD system. So here we are today, present day, with the Best Practices Replication Unit, also known as the BPRU. They're trying to figure out how is this all going to integrate, how is this going to work. This is basically getting our best practices and replicating it at other units, other organizations. So before we give you our solution, we want to make sure our solution aligns with the strategic plan, because that's very important to affirm. Like I mentioned, they want to revive this consulting branch. They want to revive that. And they want to reduce reliance on government grants. They realize government gives you the money, but they tell you where to spend it. You have no control over that. So they want to reduce reliance on that. And sustain consistent long-term growth and generate a reliable volunteer base. These we'll talk about later. And last but not least, most critical to their mission is that they empower the community of underprivileged youth. That's the most important thing.
Now, after analyzing the history as well as the culture of LAYC, we have identified 3 underlying issues that, once we address, can help to better serve the youth in Washington, D.C. The first issue would be the revenue stream. By having a diverse revenue stream, we can have a more economically stable organization, and then we can better focus on our mission of helping the youth instead of focusing on how are we going to make sure we fit the needs of keeping our revenue source. Moreover, we need to comprehensively integrate our 3 programs that we have today, which are the PYD, Impacto, as well as BPRU, into one comprehensive program so we can best allocate our time, which is a very finite resource, because we need to make sure that we reach the most amount of children in the least amount of time. And lastly, another issue would be to recruit volunteers. By having a firm volunteer base, we can make sure that we fit our mission and we go and we can interact with these children one-on-one. And without volunteers, that's not possible. So, as a college student, I've learned to solve many of my problems, almost all of my problems with food. So why don't we do that with this? And I think that salsa would be a great way to solve this problem. So salsa stands for 3 things. The first would be to save time. The second would be to learn the recipe. And the last would be to serve the community.
Well, I'm a college student. That just made me hungry. I don't know about you guys. But the first thing he mentioned was saving time. And The big thing we want to do for that, we want to implement a flipped classroom model. A flipped classroom basically would have 12 of the 42 pre-existing hours for training on online modules. This would allow the person to go home, take it there, and then come in to learn more. Don't know about you, I personally like sitting in my computer, my PJs, watching those. I think everyone else would. And this would decrease the prep time by 96 hours for the classroom instructor, and since it's online, would drastically increase the reach and make this a much more marketable option for people considering they want to expand this to such things as the Philadelphia area. Additionally, we found that 56% of students found this to be a more effective model, and 95% of students really enjoyed having the outside of classroom model because then they had a more interactive experience with the teacher. The next thing was to learn the recipe. So the first thing the client does is they come in, they learn the PYD via the online and possibly the in-classroom instruction, and then a consultant will go in for a one-time thing where they go into the client's actual operation and learn more about it through the client's own knowledge. Since the client understands it, they can integrate it into their culture without us having to actually do any interviews, which was one of the things that was suggested as a way to implement this. All of this would develop a much more effective model for the implementation and effective empowerment of youth, which is the overall mission of the organization. Finally, there is the long-term consultation as the satisfied community approach. This would be for people who were not just needing of a one-time consultation, but need a constant consultation in order to improve their organization. The way this would be done would be through 3-hour modules that would be done through telecommunication, and this would be a continual thing until the client felt that they were successful in implementing the thing, and that would improve and ultimately fulfill the mission of the organization, because this would allow for other organizations to more effectively help youth.
So, as my teammates have already said, we're using a multi-tiered salsa approach. So why don't we use a multi-tiered salsa-based pricing module? Because let's face it, who likes bland salsa? First tier is going to be mild. So with mild, that is the training module for the client. So for $75, a flat rate, the client will get access to a cloud database, which has the training videos that give them basic information and principles about PYD, and then information about what is salsa. Then we have medium. So with medium, that is a one-time consultation. Again, a flat rate, this time of $500. The consultation will last 5 days. So for $100 a day, 2 members of LAYC are going to go on site to the client and tell them, here's the foundations you learned through our training videos, here's what your salsa is. How can we integrate that into a roadmap for you to achieve both your short-term and your long-term goals? Finally, we have hot, because who doesn't like it hot? And with hot, the client would have an option to sign a 6-month contract with LAYC, where we would have a consultant telecommunicate with them for 3 hours every other week. So the advantage of this to the client is that if they have that roadmap but they don't know where to go with it, because they don't remember what was said the exact day it was presented, they can just call up their consultant and they can have a guided implementation for their solution and then move beyond that goal into the future. What happened? Okay, we're back. So, speaking about revenue, right? Let's look at your 3-year revenue projection. So, what we have, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. We have higher costs of revenue in the first year. That's because of the video production cost. After the first year, that cost is gone, and you're left with a low fixed cost of cloud storage fees and a variable cost of salaries and wages. All of your revenue is variable, which means that as the program is growing, so is your revenue. You're making revenue through videos, short-term and long-term consulting, which means that, as you can see, after 1.5 years, you're breaking even. After 2 years, you're making $5,000. After 3 years, you stand to make $7,000 in profit. Imagine how much chips and salsa $7,000 can buy. So I would like to take this time to thank you all for listening to our presentation. We did not bring chips and salsa with us today, but we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. not fit that bit. I will stay there.
Thank you guys.
Can you give an example of sort of what type of client might fit each sort of revenue stream?
Yes. Oh, that was not what I meant.
Sneak peeks again.
Let's see this one.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, sorry.
Didn't make it easy for you guys.
Yeah.
Well, we do feel like there are a lot of different organizations that would really benefit from using all of our systems. Now, as we mentioned, we give the 3 different options so that it can fit the 3 different, or the many different types of needs. There are some organizations who might need just a small problem. For example, they don't understand why students aren't coming on time to school. And that might just be a one-time consulting thing where we have a nice info session and we have some great ideas. However, if you need something that's more long-term, it would be something that's a more complex idea. For example, we have a very low graduation rate in DC currently. It is 64.6% in DC public schools. Now, if a DC public school came to us and they're looking at how do we improve this graduation rate, that's more of a long-term consulting where we look at the really deep implications and the deep issues of why this is happening and how we can improve it. And then lastly, we have the smallest option, which would be the cheapest and also the quickest. What's great about this option is that it's global. Because it's online, you can go and access it from theoretically anywhere in the world. Now, these would be possibly even foster care parents. It could be any number of organizations or even just individuals who need more knowledge with just the day-to-day interactions with developing youth. And we made this 5 forces here to show you that we really do feel like we have a competitive advantage because there's a small threat of substitution because the only thing that they can really do is have their internal curriculum. But the reason they need to come to us is because their internal curriculums have flaws and needing an outside source to see those flaws. And so, thank you.
I have a question on the configuration of sort of the web portal or web platform. Do you guys have those costs sort of integrated into your overall plan, and you plan to bring on an external consultant or a services group to handle the website? Because it seems like you would have to customize that to handle what you're trying to do here.
Well, actually, one of the things we really considered was that, because a lot of this is based online, and we did a lot of looking on the main website, and it's very obvious to us that they have technical expertise in-house already. In addition, they also talk about they have database services in-house. The technology is pretty much there, and we made the assumption that they have most of the capabilities to do that. As you said, if they wanted to, they could bring in an outside consultant, but we don't feel that would be necessary for somebody who already had the technical expertise.
If I may just add to that, I feel that the only area where they would need to bring in an outside source or outsource service is video editing, which is something that unless you have someone on site that's readily available and skillful at that, you would need to outsource. But once again, that is an overhead cost that disappears within a year.
How did you guys reach the number of 12 hours out of the 42 that should be done online?
Okay, so the curriculum is actually divided into 7 different, steps. There it is. So 7 different steps. So it's 42 hours total, right? 42 hours total for the curriculum, 6 hours each. So 6 times 7 is your 42. So the intro to PYD and just general information about youth. That's all general information to the general public. So we felt that it didn't need to be contextualized specific to the organization, like to their salsa. We thought anyone could watch that. Anyone could understand general information, and we just put this up online. This would decrease 96 hours in prep time. Just insane amounts. Just like instead of having every class where trainers are preparing double the amount of the class time. And it's 1.33 classes per week, per year that they do it. So they're just saving a lot of time.
Can you guys give a quick talk through of the 3-year projection, the revenue and cost in terms of, whether, depending what salsa you're buying?
So So what we have here is the 3-year projection. Cost is on top, revenue is on bottom. So what we're looking at is, so the most variable part of this, or the part that is sort of up for grabs, is the growth rate. So we have to sort of make assumptions about what the growth rate would be for the short-term consultant, long-term consultant, and videos. So could you repeat the question so I know what part of the PowerPoint to point to?
Yeah, go over the short term and
Yes.
versus the long term.
Okay, so short-term consulting, we felt that short-term consulting would be a little bit more accessible for the clients because it is a flat rate of $500. So we estimated that the first year you might only get 2 engagements just because it is such a new service provided by, to have a nonprofit provide this sort of consulting. But by the second year, you have a little bit more word of mouth, and by the third year, the organization as a whole and the industry as a whole is sort of seeing the value of at least having a short-term consultant come in, look at your salsa, and say, this is how we fix that specific problem. The long-term consultation, because it is rather costly, even though it is a competitive price compared to other nonprofit consultants, we felt that this would be for larger organizations that could afford to pay us, but also we had to factor in the fact that those larger organizations may not need us. So we came up with just sort of a very linear growth of how that area was going to grow in relation to short-term consulting.
So I like the concept of sort of software as a service, which is something that you see a lot in the IT industry, right? You don't want to just sell your licenses, you also want to provide consulting services, establish a long-term relationship. But obviously the cost increases with each tier, right? And again, I like the price discrimination concept too. But you usually need some sort of proof of concept to convince people that they need to buy your higher end services before you're established in the market. So I'm wondering if you guys had put any thought to sort of an initial startup to prove that the long-term consulting is superior to the short-term, is superior to the sort of the materials themselves.
Yeah, we actually did think about that in terms of the whole idea of giving them like a small sample. The idea for that we had was just basically you can give the client small snippets of each presentation and allow them to see it. This is something that could be more detailed and described by actually the organization deciding what they want to do. But you're right, they would have to consider a pilot, they would have to consider trials, and they would have to consider small ways to incentivize people to take a look at it. That, in addition, go to Brand.
Yeah, if I may add to that, so the brand awareness is inevitably going to increase. If we're seeing customer satisfaction with our nonprofit organizations, brand awareness is naturally going to increase. We're going to know that these programs are going to be effective because through the use of our ETO data analytics system. They've been using that this whole time, and they've kind of quantified the effectiveness of the implementing the PYD and SALSA. They can use the same exact thing on clients, and eventually the brand's going to grow with long-term consulting, short-term consulting, and eventually we're going to generate a lot of interest.
And one small detail I want to extend off that. Can you do it, In addition to the whole marketing thing, one of the things that I wanted to point out was the idea that they also might want to consider a logo, because as of right now, we don't actually know if they even have a logo. We made a pseudo model for them, and we've realized that, look at BBC, it's black and white. They spent $1.8 million making that. That is absurd. And 95% of people find brand name to be a big thing, so that's what he was talking about. They need to develop their brand name. With addition to the trial idea, they could really start making people understand this is a useful product, this is something that people can use, and something that people really need.
One quick question. At the beginning you outlined 3 issues. One of them was recruiting volunteers, and I don't think we really touched on that here.
Yeah.
Go to the streamline volunteer application. So, one of the major ideas we had for that was to actually make the application process much easier. When we went on the website, it had a very long and arduous thing to read with very small text for hyperlinks to an actual application, individual applications for every single thing, and this is a list of all those. Next. Oh, I can take quicker. That works. they should have a single place for all the volunteer applications to go. That's actually in addition to the website that they currently have, is like a portal for them to be able to put all the volunteer applications into one place. And then this would be an example of what the application should look like. You fill it in and send it in.
Time's up.
Thank you. We appreciate you letting us work on this project.
Conclusion time?
5 minutes for
Alright,
conclusion.
All right, so can you
Uh,
Yeah.
all right.
This might be a little bit difficult.
Go back to the.
Yep, I got it. And did you? You good?
I don't need that.
Oh, no, don't you? No, you're clear.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, so conclusion. We want to go back to the slide because ultimately it's the firm's strategic objectives that we want to fulfill. That's the most important thing. We talked about reviving this whole consulting branch. And what this does is at a multiple pricing point, we'll serve multiple consumers, your clients. And this will ultimately reduce reliance on government grants because you're having an unrestricted source of revenue, and the revenue is constantly flowing in, which means that you don't need to rely on government grants no more, or at least less. Sustained long-term growth. The two most important things we saw was number one was their revenue and our ability to generate revenue, and number two was our brand awareness. Our brand awareness, going back to your question, will also grow the volunteer base. For example, this upcoming fall I'll be working for a big consulting firm. Why apply? The brand. The brand is huge. As the brand grows, human resources should just naturally grow. That's just how it works, as opposed to a boutique consulting firm where I could have applied. And it goes for any retail store like Walmart, Kmart, or whatever else you can think of. It's just big brand names. These two things will ultimately generate a reliable volunteer base. And last but not least, the most important thing, of course, is to empower the community of underprivileged youth to realize their potential. Because ultimately, ultimately, you're supporting other organizations fulfill their goals, which is to empower their youth. And I guess as LOYC as a firm, what more can we ask for, honestly? What more can we ask for? If we can just empower these youth of this generation, that's very critical to our mission. So let's put it this way. You walk into a house party like many of us college kids do. You walk in with a bag of family-sized Tostitos and salsa, right? And sometimes out of selfish desire, you might want to just eat it all. I'm a victim of that. But most of the times, you want to share that happiness and joy. You really do. And what we're proposing to you here is that you want to share that salsa, that goodness, with everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
All right, is there anything, or?
You have 2 minutes left for your conclusion. If you want to keep going.
I think we're good.
All right.
You said everything.
Unless there's any quick questions you guys want me to answer my conclusion.
Technical Q&A's over.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.